What's going on, vinyl community? Welcome to another video with the Record Spinner. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on the Jethro Tull Aqualung ultra high quality record, otherwise known as UHQR pressing. This is a release that I've been hearing about for some time, and I have been quite curious about what entails with this pressing, as well as the UHQR brand in general. And after giving it some thought, as soon as the pre-order link went live, I decided to pull the trigger, and I figured I'd make this video to give you guys my overall verdict, and also answer the question if this release was worth taking the plunge. There is a lot to get through in this video, so without further ado, enough of the chit chat. Let's jump into what this video is all about. Now, before we talk about this particular pressing, let's dig back into the origins of UHQR. The ultra high quality record had its origins in the early 80s when it was owned by Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab. These pressings were specially plated and pressed on high definition super vinyl, which was supplied by Victor in Japan. They were mastered from the original analog tapes at half speed and mastered on an Ortofon cutting system. Now, some of the notable titles that they put out on this series were some of the notable hi-fi albums out there, such as Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, Supertramp's Crime of the Century, and Cat Stevens' Tea for the Tillerman. These pressings are highly coveted by audiophiles and vinyl collectors, and copies go for 3 figures or more. But for only that brief period, UHQR pressings were in production, and by 1982, UHQR pressings were no more. Now, we have to talk about the reissue label Classic Records. In the 2000s, they started their Clarity SVP 245 RPM series. This series allowed them to reissue audiophile albums in the form of box sets that were cut at 45 RPM, sourced from the master tapes, and pressed on single-sided LPs. However, the big selling point was that these were pressed on what was called Clarity vinyl. Now, Clarity vinyl is vinyl in its purest form, and it comes across as a sort of hazy, translucent color because vinyl records, as we all know, are black, and that is because of the carbon black elements that are added to polyvinyl chloride, or PVC. The addition of carbon-based black pigment makes the records last longer and also more durable to run through an automatic press, because with Clarity vinyl, due to the fragility of the material, the records have to be handmade. Now, since this type of process requires more labor and is unique in itself, it comes with a 3-figure price tag, although values have definitely inflated, but you best believe you are buying the best kind of product you can possibly get your hands on. Now, some of the notable releases that were done on the Clarity vinyl series were the first 4 Peter Gabriel solo albums, Led Zeppelin 1 and 4, and Jethro Tull's Aqualung. In 2010, Classic Records founder Michael Hobson sold the assets of his label to Chad Kasem at Acoustic Sounds. And of course, the other successful venture that Chad has a hand in is his reissue label, Analogue Productions. Now, since he has a label, it is an opportunity to utilize the Clarity vinyl brand. So, in 2017, Chad had purchased the right to use the UHQR brand from MoFi, which is owned by Music Direct, and he started his own UHQR series on Analogue Productions. And this time around, it was the perfect merging of all of the essential qualities of labels such as MoFi and Classic Records, all of which put in so much time, care, and attention to the releases that Chad is now prolonging into the 21st century. Now, the first release that Analogue Productions did on their new UHQR series was Axis Bold as Love by the Jimi Hendrix Experience. They did 5,000 copies of the stereo version, 1,500 copies of the mono version. They were newly cut from the master tapes by Bernie Grundman, pressed at Chad's pressing plant, Quality Record Pressings, on a manual fine-built press. Now, these releases were all the hype when they came out. Everyone was talking about it, everyone was showing off their copies, and I felt so left out because I really wanted to see what was up with this special pressing. But then again, $100 is quite the investment for one LP that was cut at 33 1/3 RPM. It was sold out during the pre-order, and the values have surely skyrocketed, and I personally have never thought I would own a UHQR pressing in my time collecting vinyl until now. So here is Jethro Tull's Aqualung UHQR pressing. As you can tell, it comes in a nice slipcase box with some gold lettering and a nice gold border around the classic album cover. And there you can see the two big companies involved, Analogue Productions and Quality Record Pressings. We have a nice leather-bound spine, which looks absolutely sharp. This will look really nice when it's stored like this in your vinyl record cubes. Opens up just like this, and now I'm going to break down all the contents of what is inside. First, we have a bit of advertisement from Acoustic Sounds, basically showcasing more prime ways to spend your hard-earned dollars. And inside, we have the next confirmed release in this UHQR series, and it is Miles Davis Kinda Blues. So we're actually going to be getting a single LP 33 1/3 edition and a 2 LP 45 RPM edition, which is pretty cool. And it also breaks down some of their 45 RPM box sets, super audio CDs, master tapes, I mean, just all kinds of good stuff. And then we have this little pamphlet here, which has a little written bit from Chad Kasem saying how this is basically one of only 5,000, copies made available, the way that it's manufactured. And then when you open it up, you see some scans from the United States Trademark Office of how he purchased the rights to use UHQR and Clarity Vinyl. And then we have the Quality Record Pressings team. These are the people involved with getting this product in our hands, so we salute them immensely. And then we have a technical specifications manual. This kind of breaks down the whole process of how they go about pressing UHQR records. Kind of goes in depth into that with some nice photographs. So as you're enjoying the music, you can also dig your way in as to how these records are specifically made, which is pretty interesting. And then we have the lyric sheet, which has all the lyrics from the album. This was featured in the original. Now, I don't know about you guys, for anyone out there that has this, but I have 2 of these. Now, I'm not sure if they're supposed to include 2, perhaps 1 to go with, each opening of the gatefold, since this is a 2 LP set. But let me know in the comment section below if you got 2 as well. If anyone needs one, let me know. Now, we get to the record itself. So here is the album, and I don't know if you can really catch it on camera, but there is a sort of texture to the cover, which, as far as I know, original pressings did have like a textured kind of feel to the cover, which is pretty nice. Nice thick spine there. Make sure you guys can read that. Get it to focus. And then here is the back. And like I said, this is limited to 5,000 copies, and they make it a point to number it as well. And as you can see right there, I have copy number 1788. Gatefold sleeve here. I'm really trying my best not to open it up too much because the binding is just so spot on. This is a nice kind of tip-on style gatefold jacket, which is just absolutely gorgeous. Comes in a nice rice paper sleeve. And now we get to the vinyl itself. This right here is Clarity Vinyl. This is vinyl at its purest form. As you can see, kind of has a bit of like a milky, kind of hazy kind of color to it, which is interesting. And of course, as you can see there, it replicates that green chrysalis label absolutely perfect. Very, very nice. And then I'll show you guys the second LP as well. And also, I do have to say for myself, these records are absolutely heavy. I mean, this is perhaps the heaviest weight kind of vinyl you could possibly get, considering that it's also, manually pressed. The quality control has to definitely be, kind of beefed up instead of just having to go through a regular kind of automatic press. So that looks absolutely sharp. Now, I should say, of course, that this is mastered from the original master tape by Chris Bellman. However, this is not a new cut. This is essentially a repress of the Classic Records 45 RPM pressing, which Analogue Productions obviously have the right to press up since they bought out the assets of Classic Records. And the obvious difference between the both of them is that the Classic Records version is 4 single-sided LPs, whereas this takes up 2 LPs. All right, so I just showed you this record. I have yet had a chance to listen to it, which I am going to do now. And with the magic of technology, I will reappear just having listened to the record just like so. Oh my goodness, guys. I really wish I filmed some reaction shots of me listening to this record because I am not going to lie. I swear on everything sacred, I had tears when I listened to this record. Oh my goodness. So, right off the bat, the pressing itself is so bold sounding and extremely dynamic. The soundstage is so huge, I swear the floor in my listening room was just pulsating to the rhythm of the bass drum, which has this sort of thump to it, which is just absolutely driving. The bass guitar itself has this really distinctive tone that just doesn't blend in with everything else and provides some bottom end to the mix. It stands out on its own as an instrument, which granted it already is, but perhaps with how this was mastered or the recording itself was engineered, it just comes across much clearer. The acoustic guitars are so crisp and lifelike sounding, and the flute has a very sort of airy quality to it, and the lead vocals, forget about it. It literally sounds as if Ian Anderson is singing directly in front of you. The best way to describe the overall sound of this pressing is lifelike, it's direct, three-dimensional, all of the possible adjectives one can think of. Now, here is what makes Aqualung a rather interesting pick for the UHQR series, because let's face it, any album that is a sonic masterpiece is an easy candidate to be given this sort of treatment. And personally, I think this album sounds absolutely beautiful in terms of how it was produced and engineered. But truth be told is that when the band was working on this album at Island Studios in late 1970, going into 1971, they were using studio monitors that weren't properly calibrated. So I guess that makes the original mix quote-unquote inferior because of that reason, but of course it is all subjective to the human ear, and personally I am not one for nitpicking because to me the original mix of this album sounds absolutely wonderful, and I truly don't regret forking out the big bucks for it because, like I mentioned, the Hendrix UHQR was just one LP, mastered at 33 1/3 and priced at $100. But this, however, mastered at 45 RPM, taking up 2 LPs and all the bells and whistles, it came out to $125, which I feel is more bang for the buck considering what you get. And already on Discogs, it is being sold for twice for what it retailed on Acoustic Sounds. And once this sells out, I can hardly imagine what the value is going to be like. Perhaps my future children's college tuition will be paid off with this thing. Only joking, of course. So when this video goes up, and if copies are still available, I would think fast about it and jump on it because this is perhaps the best sounding version of Aqualung you will ever hear. Now, do I see myself buying any more UHQR pressings? It's kind of hard to say because a product like this just oozes of quality, and there is nothing more that a physical media consumer loves more than top quality product. But with that said, I would probably have to justify getting another UHQR pressing, and the only reason is down to the price, because it just goes to show that this is not some release that you just buy willy-nilly. This is truly an investment, and the price of these pressings is quite a lot to spend on one album. But considering all of the factors that make this release so unique, it makes sense why it is marked up like that. And the big piece of advice that I would give to any potential buyers of this kind of product is to make sure that your setup is properly calibrated to enjoy a pressing as deluxe as this. And it's perhaps suggested for those who are, truly, big fans of this album and this band. And in this case, I'm a huge Jethro Tull fan, and I think Aqualung is one of the most important and best progressive rock albums ever. So there was absolutely no disputing it. But this is not some mainstream release that is catered to your casual music fan. This is for the serious audiophiles and hi-fi enthusiasts. And luckily, I am within that demographic, not so much to the extremes of having a setup that has the same value as a car per se, but I can appreciate the sound of analog and the work that entailed with a release like this. And plus, on the other hand, I am a vinyl collector, and this pressing stands out for being one of the more rather unique pieces in my collection since it's pressed on Clarity vinyl, which you don't see in much other vinyl releases. But with all that said, I really like what Chad and Analogue Productions are doing with this new UHQR series, and I am certainly curious to see what new titles they are going to cover in the future. They certainly can use the metal parts from previous Classic Records releases, but who knows what's in the can. I will certainly keep my eyes open, and if I feel that it's an album that I really love and would love to experience in this format, then I will definitely snag it. Now, side note, this release was a perfect excuse for me to get a copy of the original mix on vinyl, and hearing it in this format was an absolute no-brainer. But the other copy that I have of this album in my collection is the Steven Wilson remix that he did for the 40th anniversary. This is a fantastic pressing. The mix itself is great, and it also comes with a nice book full of liner notes and photographs, which is very nice. And since I listened to this UHQR pressing, I am quite curious how these both rack up against each other. Shall I do a comparison video? Shoot me a comment down below. I would love to know. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support this channel, be sure to check me out on Patreon. See you guys in the next video. And most importantly, keep the records spinning.